Welcome to This Is Not About Your Body, a body neutrality podcast where we talk about all the real shit body image issues are actually about, because they are never just about the way you look. I'm your host, Jessie Nealand, and today I have with me Jeanette Thompson-Wessen, who is a nutritionist and fat content creator who specializes in intuitive eating and fat joy and helping fat people become intuitive eaters so they can live their best, nourished, and fulfilled lives. I discovered Jeanette as the Mindset Nutritionist on Instagram, and I loved her content and perspective so much, so I had to invite her on here. So welcome, Jeanette.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on today.
Of course. So I'm going to have us just start with the basics and have you talk a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Oh, that's a difficult thing to start.
It is.
Well, as you said, I am a fat nutritionist. I have been spending my time just passionately wanting fat people to just unapologetically take up space, because we are told from all angles of society to shrink ourselves just as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much against people being in fat bodies at the moment. We've got weight loss surgeries, we've got weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
There's so much that's turning against us that it feels really difficult to exist in fat bodies right now. And I fully believe that people who are trying to look for things, and I don't blame anyone who's going to end up with like weight loss surgery or on weight loss drugs. I don't blame anyone, because it's society's fault. It's not the individual's fault that these choices are being made. And I fully believe if someone stopped them for a moment and just went, hold on a second, have you done some work around this? Have you tried to take back the word fat? Have you tried these things? Because I wholeheartedly think if that was accessible to people, that maybe not everyone would say no to those things, but a big majority would say no to those things. But there's a growing number of like fat content creators and fat professionals as well, kind of coming into this, seeing that we are needed in this space, absolutely needed in this space. So that's the space that I unapologetically now take up, because I recognize that people really need this, and people need to have a fat person that has this messaging come from as well. And me personally, I think I was looking back not even that long ago. I think it's my last proper fully invested diet was about 8-9 years ago. And it was something in the UK that's very similar to Weight Watchers. It's Slimming World.
Yeah.
And I did it for a year. I lost 3-4 stone with that. And that way I was eating so little. So, and the nutrition scientist in me was very much like, I don't understand this, because I'm not nourishing my body. I'm not getting the nutrients that my body needs. And there was this like dichotomy in my brain. I'm going, but I'm not, like, my snacks either didn't exist or was me binging on ham in front of the fridge because I was so hungry, and ham was free on the diet. Free. Like I could eat as much ham as I wanted to have without it apparently making me put on weight. And in my brain, nothing worked. Nothing was like coming together. And I was just, how can ham be, and only ham be, a nourishing thing for my body? Yet I'm being told from so many angles that my body is not good enough. My body is not worthy. I'm unhealthy inherently from being in a fat body. And I just didn't understand it until years later, someone said to me, oh, have you heard about health at every size? And that was literally, I was like, sorry? And I did this deep dive into that. And there was my light bulb moment of, this makes so much sense. My body is literally supposed to be fat. I'm supposed to be this way. I know that when I nourish myself, then this is how my body looks. And there was a lot that came up with that.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try and keep it streamlined here, because I share a background from like I came to this work from the fitness industry as a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And I do feel like there's something in when you're coming from the nutrition and fitness space and you find science really interesting,
Mm.
that it's like, it is a very hard transition in some ways to get away from that and be like, but it was evidence-based. But, I read the research, like this is what, body recomposition looks like. But yeah, health at every size was also one of my first introductions, and yeah, set me off down the path too. So I love that. Also, you just said the word fat about 500 times. So
Yeah.
I am just going to hold that some of our listeners are going to be a little uncomfortable, and I'd love you to speak directly to the fact. I also use it as a neutral descriptor, but in case anyone's sitting in their car right now or whatever, being like cringing, can you talk a little bit about why you use the word fat as opposed to some other descriptor?
I use fat because it is a word that is used as like a hate word, right? Like when people are fat from childhood, or even not fat from childhood, we learn from such a young age that fat is bad. And you use that as a really easy insult.
Yeah.
And it's just battered around. People would just be like, you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. Now, what if we take that back? Because that's an insult for someone's appearance, right? That's something that people can't control. People don't choose to exist in a fat body, because if we chose to exist in a fat body, fat people wouldn't exist, because the world hates fat people and fatness so much. So if we take that word back and own that, and I say it as if it's the easiest thing in the world, I recognize it is hard. It is so incredibly hard to take that word back. But then when that word becomes something that is neutral to you, when that word becomes something that is just, this is just how I am existing in this body right now, it comes with incredible power, because then you start changing your relationship with yourself and your body. It's kind of the first step in going, okay, this is me. This is my body, and I am enough, and I am worthy, and I am fat, and that is neutral.
Yeah.
Then hopefully in the future, once you've taken that back and you find the power of taking that word back and literally saying to people, I am fat. And then it's this funny thing of people being like, no, you're beautiful. You're not fat, you're beautiful. And I'm like, I'm both. And I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have myself any other way. And you actually can find a place of fat joy as well. So it sounds quite out there really for some people to be thinking the word fat and joy together. But there's so much fat joy in the world. It really is.
Great answer. Also, I think that we see this with the word queer, but the word queer has had longer in this space to kind of become a warm, friendly, cozy word in our society, whereas fat is just beginning its journey to a warm, friendly, cozy word.
In the UK, when I was growing up, obviously in a homophobic environment, because that's just the world, right? We have all these things we've got to work on. I remember gay being the insult. You're
me
gay,
too.
and using that as like a really like, how awful is it to be gay? I could like, if someone did that in front of me right now, I'd be the one to go, hold on a second.
Right.
No. And that's the same here. It's very much like, no, we don't use gay as an insult, because gay isn't an insult.
Right.
Gay isn't, once again, a choice. It is someone who loves another person. And that, why would we be using that as an insult? It's the same with fat. Fat's on that same journey. Gay, that word has been taken back by the LGBTQIA community. Fat, we're taking that back within our community, our fat community, and we'll get there eventually.
There's also something you can see in that playing out where it just doesn't make any freaking sense anymore, because our context for the word gay or queer has changed so dramatically that like it would literally be confusing to me. I would have a moment of cognitive dissonance if someone tried to use it as a slur, because I'd be like, wait, what are you trying to, because it just doesn't land that way anymore. And we can see how that has become neutral. I mean, what, 25 years? In 25 years, something like that? Yeah. And I agree with you. I think fat's going that direction too.
And
I love that.
we will get that. I think there's a huge group of people who are now not accepting that we shouldn't be commenting on other people's appearance, because we can't have and I think fat is going to be one of those last things, because there's usually a caveat to that, isn't there? Is that we don't have control over our appearance, yeah, but you could be thinner. And so we have that still, and there's still, there's so much work that comes in us individually to try and separate ourselves from that, and that harm and the trauma that comes from that as well. But then on a societal level, there's so much, to think about with like weight stigma and the experience of weight stigma and the anti-fatness and fat representation. There just isn't fat representation, which is why people are coming to social media to try and find that social, like that representation that we deserve.
Yep.
But it's just not, when you turn on the TV, it's not there. We don't have fat people just exist in their lives. Fat people are the joke, the kind of person on the sidelines. We're the person who should be like losing weight, all of these things, other than just a fat person existing and living their best life. Like, why can't we see more of that, please?
Yeah. Ooh, and another parallel there. I feel like we're just getting to that place recently with the queer space. Queer representation has made a huge shift in the last like 5-10 years. And that was way later in the process. So it might be a while for fat representation. Ugh.
Oh,
okay.
no.
I know. Sorry, everybody. I'm bumming everyone out. Okay. So yes, weight is not in our control the way that we have all been taught it is. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about what that means, or for anybody who's sitting there being like, but isn't it though? Do you think you can speak to that? Just in a quick little spiel, pack all the science into 30 seconds here.
I'll do it in 30 seconds. So weight doesn't equal like health. We don't have control over all of these things, the things that we see on social media, and the incredible powerful messages, but also confusing messages when you log onto the internet and you search any kind of health like thing and Google it, the first thing that comes up is, oh, you got to lose weight. If you lose weight, this will cure you. We've got all of that's going on, and it all kind of feeds into itself. And I don't know really where do I start with this? Because it's so big, isn't it?
It is. It's huge. I know. I guess just what do you say to someone who says, but it seems like it is because I've lost weight when I dieted, for example? Oh, so isn't it in our control?
It's an hour on that. It's not in our control, because we have like our bodies are so complicated, right? There are so many things that we don't actually know about our body, and there are scientists working on these things. There's reasons why we haven't got cures for cancer right now, and we can't find vaccinations for everything under the sun, because our body is inherently and incredibly complicated. And that's the same with our weight. Like our weight, we do not, there are people who are working on the DNA in the background of how our DNA is expressed with our weight, and they have massive question marks, being like, we know that there's stuff going on with our DNA, and also how that DNA is expressed, and then how that DNA actually has an impact on our body and how it's read. So there's multiple layers just with our DNA alone, and they know that our DNA has a big impact on our weight, but how? They have no idea. And then the question they're asking is it because of the DNA that we're fat, or is there an expression issue? And they're coming from it not from a fix thing. It's more of an interest of, so how are these diseases or these health problems that are correlated with fatness, how is that impacting with this DNA? So we have these multiple layers of things going on. So DNA is a massive thing in regards to our weight. You can probably sit there, if you're sitting there and listening to this, and you have a large or a fat body yourself, think about your family. Like commonly, you probably have people in your family who are also in a large body. Some people obviously don't have that. So when we think about that, it's also about how our lives. Like, think about your life, think about what you don't have in control of your life, like your social economics, like where do you live, your education level. Loads of different things come into this. And when I say education level, I'm not talking about, oh, if you don't go up high enough with your education level, then you're going to be, it's big, it's a bigger, wider conversation than that. It's how much access have you had? Has your government helped you with that access? Because all of that impacts on you and your weight. It's not necessarily, oh, I did multiple degrees and therefore I'm, you know, it's not that kind of low level kind of thinking. We're going deeper into this. So there's even been research about how close people are to big major roads, and the closer you are to big major roads and the pollution, that also has an impact on the expression on your DNA, and then also increases your weight as well. And when we think about that, we're thinking, oh, the majority of people who are around those kind of areas with high levels of pollution may be people who are maybe on the breadline, you know, people who are much more disadvantaged, maybe not financially advantaged, usually people in, you know, the BIPOC community, you know, those kinds of areas are going to have those kinds of problems. And then you have a whole load of weight stigma on top of that. And weight stigma actually has been shown to increase your weight as well because of the trauma that you hold and the shame and the sadness and everything that happens from that weight experience, that weight stigma that you experience. And you can't control that. You can't control that kind of experience that you get. So basically, we have no control for loads of reasons.
Such a complex answer. I know there's so much you didn't even touch on. Like, God, it is, I think, so much easier to understand calories in versus calories out and want that to be the case than it is to have an honest, nuanced, and accurate understanding of what goes into this kind of thing. Like, I understand the appeal of having a super simple paradigm, even if it's harming people. It's a complex issue, and that is not how we're taught to think about things like this, especially in something so loaded with weight stigma and oppression.
I just think it's oversimplified, and I feel like it's sad sometimes of how oversimplified it is, because we're almost, I think it comes down to a bit of white supremacy. We're just expecting that people who have all these certificates and these multiple degrees and these multiple levels of education above them, and they're looking down at everyone else going, okay, well, we need to simplify it to these people below us. We're not stupid. People without certificates are not stupid people. None of us are stupid. And I feel that there's that level there, and of a lot of people kind of looking down at people. We don't need to oversimplify things for people. We can still have these nuanced conversations with anybody, and we shouldn't be stripping their autonomy away so much because people think that when you have a certificate, you know more and you're going to understand more. Like, why can't we talk to people on their own level? Why do we have to have that jargon there?
That's so true. It's so patronizing. That's interesting. Okay. So I wanted to ask about the role of intuitive eating. Once you've basically named that we don't have control over our weight, then the reasonable next step is I'm not going to diet and try to lose weight, since that's, you know, if that there's no purpose to that. And basically what we have as an offering for the next option is intuitive eating. So could you describe intuitive eating a little bit, sort of, if somebody hasn't been introduced to the concept, what it is?
Intuitive eating is a way of nourishing yourself in a way that serves you in your life. And that kind of sums it up for me. I really like it.
I like that.
Notice how I don't use the word health.
Right.
And that is fully intentional. And it's intentional because as soon as we start adding that word health in there, we add a morality into there, because society makes health a moral issue. And actually, once again, like I said, that weight isn't something we can control. A lot of our health isn't something we can control as well. As soon as we start placing that morality on top of health, then if someone, you know, ends up being ill for whatever reason, that intense guilt and shame. I find that a lot with people who end up being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. There's a massive stigma with being diagnosed with that. And if we can start really early on shift in the conversation of health not being also something that is fully controlled by ourselves, then people experience less stigma when they actually end up, and less of that, oh my God, if I just would have eaten less sugar in the whole of my life, then I wouldn't have ended up with diabetes. And actually the conversation is, you probably would have ended up with diabetes anyway. It's just that your life would have been a little bit more boring because you didn't have sugar.
Yeah, that is a great definition. I love that it's so concise, and it doesn't go into a lot of the stuff that I normally think of in a definition for intuitive eating. So
It's intentional.
I know, I think that's great. Yeah, because I think I probably focus on the listening to your body part. Yeah. That's usually where my head goes, that you're allowing your body to tell you what you need, as opposed to following like an external plan that somebody, society, whoever has given you. But yeah, it could be anything. And maybe you don't even have to listen to your body for it to work, because it's whatever kind of eating serves you in your life. Yeah.
And that's exactly. So when we think about people who are neurodivergent, neurodivergent people, they don't have, they can't, it's not that they don't have the same signals in our body. It's just that people, say for example, ADHD is where my brain goes with it. Someone with ADHD finds it incredibly hard to listen to their own hunger signals and their fullness signals. And they may be there, and some people with ADHD may be able to figure those out, but it's actually very, very rare for someone with ADHD to actually feel those signals. And it's not something that's inherently wrong with them. Once again, it's because they're neurodivergent. It's just that neurodivergent people can't do things the same way as neurotypical people, and in expecting someone who's neurodivergent to act the same way as a neurotypical person, we're going to harm them, right? So I don't talk about that in my definition, because I'm thinking about people who can't hear that, who will probably need a little bit more of a structured and a reminder of when to eat, which will help them along their way with their intuitive eating. And a lot of those people will just need to carry on having that structure and those reminders throughout all of their eating that they need to do, because that's the way that nourishes them best. And as soon as we start kind of talking mainly about this as, you get to listen to your body, then we're almost closing the doors to neurodivergent people to being able to access intuitive eating.
That is a fantastic point, and not something that I've really thought about. Do you think that do you know the answer? Is there an answer to why someone with ADHD would have less of a connection to those cues? I'm so curious. Maybe there's no answer. If you have one.
Their interoception is just really is just very difficult. They find it very difficult to get that interoception, but also the kind of layers of forgetting. If ADHD,
that part makes sense.
As soon as you put something in the cupboard, it's forgot. Hyperfocus as well. If you're sitting down, you're hyperfocusing for hours on end. You can hyperfocus easily through breakfast and lunch, and you get to dinner and go, I haven't eaten anything all day. So their hunger signals may be there somewhere, but they're not loud enough to be able to interrupt that hyperfocus. Oof. So there's many reasons why someone and there's we could go really deep into all of this and talk about other neurodivergent people, but those are just some examples.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I know that something that you're really passionate about is making sure that this is accessible to neurodivergent folks, and also really educating people on the differences and how the intuitive eating journey might look if you are actually neurodivergent, so that there's not that feeling of it being prohibitive or like not working or sort of creating shame. So let's just look at that a little bit. Do you have other examples of differences for someone who is neurodivergent versus neurotypical when it comes to what the intuitive eating process tends to look like?
Mindful eating can look really different.
Say more about that.
Mindful eating is really, really, really tricky for people who are neurodivergent. It could be something that's really uncomfortable to sit there and trying to do mindful eating. So usually when we're talking about mindful eating with a neurotypical person, we're talking about, okay, don't turn on the TV, remove distractions, try to,
Mhm.
be mindful, focus on your meal, how does it taste? What's the texture?
Yeah.
All of those kind of things. Actually, that can be really overwhelming and overstimulating for someone. Really, it can be a situation where it just feels really uncomfortable. And what we don't want to be doing is removing something that feels um that well not doesn't feel that isn't going to serve them. If we're telling someone to
Right.
do mindful eating and they cannot do it, then that comes up. A lot of people who are neurodivergent, they feel from society that their life isn't put together, it
Yep.
isn't doesn't come across the way that they want it to, their houses aren't clean like everyone else's, like
Yeah.
the clutter that can be around, especially with like ADHD. And they feel as if they should be doing better in society, they should be better put together, better human beings. And I say this because we need to strip ourselves of all of those feelings,
Yeah.
and once again that takes work to be able to
Yeah.
do that. But if we're kind of putting those expectations on, they're really harmful. So with mindful eating, where we go for is actually don't switch off your TV. If that's something that helps you
Yeah.
and that helps you in that moment, switch on your TV. You don't have
Yeah.
to be mindful in the way that this is specifically telling you to. Can you be mindful in a more of a different way? So can you be mindful in your environment? So you're like, okay, I'm eating this meal, I'm enjoying this meal. Why am I enjoying this meal? I have got the TV on, and that's really nice. I've got this kind of way of eating, which I really enjoy. I like the lights, I like the sounds, I like what I'm listening to. Then I like the taste and the texture and the
Yeah.
combination, all of that together. Why do I like that? And picking that up, but without any shame. Because if we're
Right.
telling people to turn off the TV, we're adding to shame. I can't do
Yeah.
this. So it's trying to make it as accessible as possible, knowing that intuitive eating, it is very much, if we're being really real about intuitive eating, it's for people who have financial privilege,
Mhm.
who generally are in smaller bodies, who are neurotypical, who are traditionally quite white. You know, it's there's a whole lot of privilege in
Yeah.
intuitive eating, and for me, I like to find ways to make it accessible to as many people as possible
Yeah.
because I feel like that's right.
Yeah. So something about this that I really love is I define body neutrality as the process of stripping away moral significance and meaning from our bodies.
Yeah.
I don't talk a ton about food in my content, but I certainly will always include like food neutrality is basically stripping away the moral significance and meaning of food. But you're actually taking it like even further in a way that often doesn't get talked about, which is really stripping away like moral significance of eating, not just foods, like the idea that there are no good foods and bad foods, I think people have all heard. But certainly, if you get into this space and learn about intuitive eating, you are going to learn that there is the right way to do it, the good way to do it. And that if you can't do that, you're sort of doing something wrong. And that I feel like is the moralizing of like healing and wellness culture that drives me bonkers,
Yes.
because then you're here trying to like fight against stigma, and you're facing this whole other stigma about how good intuitive eaters look.
Yeah.
And how is this helping?
It doesn't help.
It doesn't.
That's the issue, isn't it? We're replacing with some expectations with another thing.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful for anybody, literally anybody. That's going to harm, obviously, our people who have multiple marginalized and oppressed identities. But in general, it harms everyone, which
Yeah.
is why I believe we need to talk about this. It's something I talk about
Yeah.
with my clients, is trying to actually make them realize that it's not, we don't just want to think about the food as it is. We're taking a wider angle,
Yeah.
like taking a step back to look at the whole thing, because
Yeah.
our eating environment is important, but what about that is important? And that's going to look different for every single person as well.
Yeah.
And helping people with that is just as important as helping people with the physical food that they might put in front of them as well.
Yes. Also, it just makes me think of meditation, because I feel like when I started getting into the healing space, And every single person on the goddamn planet told me I needed to like sit mindfully for 20 minutes every day in order to basically be healed. And I carried shame about not only my lack of meditating, but how much I disliked it for years before basically realizing, oh shit, this is another area I've moralized. It's just that I didn't see it at first because it came from these like healing people.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in this space for sure.
Yeah. And that, what you experience there is really common with people who are ADHDers.
That's actually what I learned. Yeah, it was basically neurodivergent and people with trauma maybe shouldn't be told to sit still for 20 minutes. And like, that doesn't feel safe to them. Can we please have a more nuanced conversation about where mindfulness can play a role? So yeah. Okay. I think, where do I go with this? Because there's so much interesting stuff in this. I think I'd like to hear more about what you were saying about it being an incredibly privileged journey. So you haven't defined the intuitive eating journey as the way that most people have probably encountered it. So just to define it that way, usually it's something like, it's a way of eating in which you listen to your body and eat whatever you want, whenever you want. But also by doing it this way, you're going to want to eat sort of moderately or healthy-ish or whatever. Like that's generally what people will come across, right? Am I missing anything in that definition?
No, it's roundabout right.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea of eating anything you want, whenever you want, that financial and class privilege is baked into that so deeply. Can you talk about like how you work with people of different privilege levels in that space who maybe can't just go waste money on food or hit their craving in order to be a good intuitive eater in that moment? Or what does the difference look like when you're working with people in that position?
It looks like body respect.
What does that mean?
Looks like talking to them going, this isn't just because giving yourself unconditional permission to eat, and also listening, responding to your hunger signals. Just because you can't do those and those aren't accessible to you right now, it doesn't mean you aren't an intuitive eater. And I think this is the thing. We have been so taught by diets that either you're doing a diet or you're not doing a diet. You're on the bandwagon, you're off the bandwagon. But when people are becoming, trying to become intuitive eaters, there's none of this, oh, I've fallen off this bandwagon, or I can't do this at the moment. It's just it's a tool, right? And it's a tool we can put down. And that's what I say to people. Give yourself permission to be able to take intuitive eating and go, I'm going to temporarily put that down. When my life is back in the place where I do have more money that I can financially access this,
right,
then I can pick that back up again. But I'm not going to feel bad about that, because it's not my fault that I'm in the situation. There's so many other things and that's the real key there, is kind of helping people understand that they can give themselves so much compassion in that moment, to know that there's no shame in putting tools down. Tools can serve us. Tools are brilliant. I'm passionate about intuitive eating. I wish that everyone could do it, but realistically, not everyone can do it all the time. Being able to know that they can just place it safely down and come to back to that when they need that, knowing that they've got those tools that they can bring back into their lives whenever they want to. And I think being able to give people that permission is really wonderful to do that, because then you strip the shame away. Because when we look at all the messages around people, who don't have enough money to be able to access basic food, right? Which should be a human right, to get basic food and drink and have access to basic food and drink. It is crazy. In 2023, we have people who cannot do that, right? And if we're thinking about these people and the messaging of like, you should be able to, ultra processed food at the moment, it's been a massive thing that people have been talking about. And I do air quotation, usually ultra processed food. It's a layer of shame that people don't need during a cost of living crisis. I don't understand why they're doing it right now, because why shame a whole load of people who may only be able to afford some chicken nuggets and chips because they're super cheap right now? I'd much rather people be putting something on their plate they're nothing because they're so scared of ultra processed food. I just
Absolutely.
don't understand it. It's that's also another conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it is quite literally saying you're bad because you're poor.
Yeah.
You're failing
And you
because you're
should
poor.
feel bad about it. You should feel,
Yeah. And it's definitely your fault. So, like,
and it's not though, is it?
of
And
course.
that's why when I work with people who are in that situation, it's you place it down. It's
Yeah.
okay. You'll come back to it. This isn't your fault.
I'm also trying to think of another example where we feel quite the same amount of shame, self-blame, or stigma around not being able to meet our needs in the moment. And I'm struggling to come up with one because, like if you're really tired and can't sleep a whole lot this week, we don't usually get down on ourselves. Like, what is wrong with me that I'm not meeting my sleep needs? Like, I don't think other areas generally carry this same kind of moralizing. And obviously, what is wrong with me? Why can't I diet? Is one way of being shamed and stigmatized. But then also, what's wrong with me? Why can't I, get the food to be a perfect intuitive eater is another.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So your brand is for fat people.
For fat
Tell
people.
me about the difference when approaching the intuitive eating journey for someone in a fat body versus a straight sized body. What are the differences that you see that make it so important to have someone just focusing on that one experience?
It's harder. In one really kind of brief thing, it's far harder when you are a fat person trying to reject diets and just trying to put weight on the back burner. When you have diets, but you are quite literally targeted, and you're targeted from sponsored ads, like when you're scrolling through social media and you get that
Yeah.
kind of, do your intermittent fasting and all of that kind of thing, or even so far as to having a PT just turn up in your DMs and be like, hi, I think I'll be really useful for you. Would you like to lose weight with me? I've got a great challenge going on. And it's unwelcome because it's just someone you don't know who's found you and gone, oh, that's a fat person, they want to lose weight, and they just slide into your DMs. We get that all the time. So we can't put weight on the back burner. We can't just really, we can't just as easily, I mean, everyone finds it difficult to reject diets, but when our bodies are so harshly stigmatized, when we're told that if we don't lose weight, we're going to die before we're 50, or as I've been told by quite a few trolls, and I take it as a compliment, really, that I'm going to die before I'm 30. I'm 35, and I quite like telling them that. I must be some
Oh
kind
my
of ghost
God.
because here I am.
Wow.
I know. But I mean, that's it. We get that we get the overt kind of conversation from people. We get the much more subtle anti-fatness as well. So it makes it far more difficult for people to go into, even just to start the intuitive eating stuff, trying to reject that.
Yeah.
It's when we're doing stuff with, a fat person, we're not just thinking about their eating, we're also thinking about how they feel in their body. Because if we're not helping them externalize their own internal anti-fatness, then no matter how far we get with intuitive eating, there's still going to be that fear of, but what if I get fatter?
Yeah.
And when you are a fat person anyway, and you know what life is like as a fat person anyway, that fear, and you haven't actually challenged your own internalized anti-fatness, that fear of getting fatter than what you are right now and the loss of privilege you'll know that you're going to have is so intense. And being able to work through that while you're going through intuitive eating can be incredibly healing, as can fat community. And that's one thing that, fat people don't have. We don't have, especially people who are going through intuitive eating and really radically rejecting diets. There's not many of us around. You can go to a weight loss club and everyone's going to be there, probably in big, large, fat bodies, but they're all going to be talking rubbish about themselves. They're going to be hating themselves. And I get it. I've been there. I've
Yeah.
been there, done that. I was also one of those people in the past who was doing
Yeah.
the same thing, who was also being clapped because I was slimmer of the week because I had a sickness and diarrhea bug and I lost a whole
Yeah.
load of weight, which now is crazy. But at the time, I was really proud of myself. I was
Ooh,
like, I'm glad
yeah.
it lasted that long because I'm so glad I lost that weight. So I've been there. But when you step out of dieting, you almost lose that community
Yeah.
and it can feel lonely because
Yeah.
then also you have questions from other people, but why aren't you dieting? And how do you answer that? And it becomes this thing of I'm interested, but then do you have the energy to be able to
Yeah.
explain to people? But actually, I've been reading about health at every size. I've been following loads of fat positive
Yeah.
creators. And I now want to start describing myself as fat. But no, but you're fat and beautiful. Oh no, I'm worried about your health. And
Yeah.
all of these things kind of come up straight away. So having fat community, I feel like it just felt I started a new group on Monday for my group coaching, and one of the people who was there just went, I think it was even just 20 minutes in, she was like, just being here with fat people who just get it is
Oh,
so empowering and so safe and so wonderful. And it just filled
yes.
my heart up. I was just like, this is exactly why I created the space, because we
Yeah.
need community. We lose
Yeah.
it when we reject dieting. So
Yeah.
there's a big reason why I ended up just going, no, I'm going to be exclusively for fat people. I
Yeah.
want to give fat people that safety with a fat person in front of them as well, so they know that I get it.
Yes. God, that's so beautiful and moving. I love that. Also, I feel like for people at any size, with clients, I often find myself saying that if people who are on board with this
Mm.
or other fat folks like who are willing to talk positively and change, like if that doesn't exist in your town, in your family, in your community, you basically have to go find it on the internet. Or the reasons that I give so many book recommendations, even though I think a lot of the information in the books that I recommend is dope and helpful, it's more like you have 10 friends now who
Yeah,
all get it
yeah,
because you read 10 books and everyone was on board. It just shifts the feeling of like, I'm the outsider in this space. I'm wrong.
mm.
And we cannot do this kind of dismantling work without, like, if we feel alone, we just can't.
It's just so lonely, isn't it?
It's
And it
so
takes so
lonely.
much energy.
Yeah. And it's just, yeah, it's not how we're wired. We were
No,
never supposed to go forth and do stuff like this alone. We are communal people. That community is huge.
it is.
So, in your work, then, do you see there being anything when working with like these extra obstacles, extra hardships facing fat people who are trying to move through the intuitive eating journey? Do you have any specific like tools that you use in those spaces that are specific, or, strategies, or yeah, do you have like approaches that apply only or mostly with fat people going through it?
Well, the main ones that I use that are exclusively for fat people is fat liberation education and also fat futurist education as well. Because we can't, if we're trying to work with ourselves individually, even more power from the community comes from fat liberationist spaces. And being able to educate people in fat liberation and give them that kind of community to fall into as well,
Yeah.
and also to think about wider than ourselves also gives us even more power and even more
Yeah.
security and more stability in our journey as well, knowing that there's other fat liberationists. Some people like to lean more towards, I find that we have, especially in the start of their journeys, we have people who are just incredibly sad about how their lives have gone because of how they've been treated about their
Yeah.
bodies, and they realize that it's not their fault, but it's just they're really sad. And then other people are just really angry. How
Yeah.
dare I get treated this way and forced to do this and this and this to my body? They feel stripped of their body autonomy throughout their lives, and they
Mhm.
feel like they've regained that back. So I find that people who end up with anger end up going more towards like fat activism and want to do things
Totally.
Yeah, which I love, but also equally I love like the people who are sad end up absorbing so much incredible work from like fat liberationist spaces and start having really wonderful conversations with the people around them and really start slowly drawing like people in, which is what I love. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think the newest thing that I've added is fat futurism. And I have been a fat liberationist for a while, but I think I lean a little bit more now towards fat futurist because there's so much hope in it.
Can
And
you
fat,
define it?
yeah, being fat futurist is thinking about our future fats and what our world looks like for future fat people.
Mm.
And that comes with so much hope for me because
Mm.
our generation of fat people, the people who exist in this world as fat people, aren't going to be the only fat people who are here. So
Yeah.
being able to look forward towards the people who are going to either become fat or who are going to be born fat or just exist
Yeah.
as fat people, trying to help them move through life as a fat person is fat futurist. It's challenging fertility places. It's challenging them and going, so you have a BMI cutoff for IVF and
Yeah.
fertility support. You know, that's, you know, really extremely quite, you know, eugenic.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
are trying to get rid of fat people. We know that DNA, that fat people come from DNA as well. If we are preventing more fat people from being born because of an arbitrary thing like BMI, you know, what is that looking for? Like for the people in our future and their
Mm.
own mental health.
Yeah.
It's looking towards how the state of our healthcare is. You know, if our state of our healthcare is so heavily stigmatized and that people are being constantly traumatized, which has a physical impact on us, then yes, there are going to be less fat people. That's because they're dying early, not because of
Yeah.
their fat, because of the trauma they are
Yeah.
actually picking up just for being in a fat body.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that weight stigma is awful. It is
Yeah.
horrendous. And um, it's something that I've ended up picking up PTSD from. So it has an incredible impact on people.
Yeah. So I only recently, like maybe a month ago, came across the term fat futurist. So this is super fascinating. I haven't got to talk to anybody about it, but I feel more hopeful even just hearing you talk about it. I mean, that does feel really incredible and warm. And I think knowing how difficult it can be to do some of this work and take up some of this space and fight for yourself,
Mm,
it's so much harder for a lot of people to do that than it is to fight for on someone else's behalf.
yeah.
So it gives this like booster system of like, okay, if you don't feel worthy of doing it for yourself today, thinking about this
Exactly.
world. Oh, I love that. And
It's really
yeah, go ahead.
warm, isn't it? Like you said, it's really
Yeah,
warm.
really warm.
There's so much. I think when we talk about fat liberation, there feels almost sometimes like um, a pull down sometimes. I
I
feel like it
get
has a
that.
down energy sometimes. And not that you know, I still am a fat liberationist. I still very much love the education that's there fully, you know,
Yeah.
I really enjoy that side of things, but I feel like fat futurist is that lift up energy,
Oh,
that kind of hope that we can get from the future rather than us plodding along trying to carry on as we are now. No, there is hope for the future.
yeah.
For people who exist in fat bodies, there is a kind of future ahead and we can work towards that.
Yeah, I would agree. I also identify as a fat liberationist, and I actually give all of this material pretty much to clients and anybody's who are dealing with weight stuff because I just think it's so important. Uh, but I almost feel like maybe the reason it has a downward pull is it feels like uh justice will be served and then it's done almost, it's like
Yeah,
we're fighting for equality and then there's like this draw off point
yeah.
instead of the futurism ideas, like it's a continued evolution, it continues to grow and evolve and get better. Yeah, it does feel really different.
And I feel like we deserve more than just, and I say just, but just isn't the right word. Like fat liberationists, we want to have, healthy qualities. We want to have
Yeah.
political
Yeah.
equalities. We want to have housing, work equalities, all of these things that should be basic needs for us as
Yeah.
human beings. And we're not there. Obviously, we're not there yet. And fat liberationist kind of stops there, whereas fat futurist, like you said, takes that further.
Yeah.
And
And
that's what I
what
love about it.
when I imagine fat joy, it's like it could exist with liberation, of course, but it definitely exists with futurism.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's where I imagine it just thriving. It's
We
like this
are
is the
fat
world.
and
Yeah.
thriving
Yeah.
in a fat futurist world.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. Um, anything I haven't asked you about yet that you want to talk about? I had a bunch of questions around like the privilege stuff. But I just think that you're a fascinating human and everything you say is amazing. So I also just want
Oh,
to I just want to ask.
oh, thank you. I don't know. I think we've kind of.
Oh, I did have sorry,
Go
you
on.
finish.
Go on. No, no, no. I was going to say I
Okay.
don't really have anything else, but
I had an Instagram
oh,
post I wanted to talk about of yours that I
yeah.
loved so much. So you wrote PSA, even if being in a larger body was undoubtedly a bad thing, there is still not any safe or reliable way to lose weight and keep it off. I wanted to like blow this up and hang it everywhere because I feel like it's such an important message, and a lot of anti-diet content
Yeah.
understandably revolves around this content of like fat liberation, it's okay to be fat, but a lot of people are not there yet.
Yeah.
And this speaks to a whole other reason to do the pursuit of intuitive eating or anti-diet, which is it didn't work. It's not working. It doesn't work.
Mm.
It's so simple. And even if you're not in a place of like, yes, liberation, go fat bodies, that is a pretty damn good reason to move away from what we've been offered. So I was hoping just to have you clarify that maybe a little bit and talk about why it's so important to acknowledge.
Well, just diets don't work. Don't do that. just they just don't work. I did a deep dive actually into, when we're in these like anti-diet spaces, a big statistic that comes up is 95% of diets don't work, right? I actually disputed that. And I did dispute that because my scientific brain was like, I don't get this, I don't understand this, because I said before how complicated we are. There's no way to put a statistic on something that is so complicated as diets working or not working.
Yeah.
But we can listen to a whole load of lived experience as well. We've got lived experience, we have got
Yeah.
statistics, and the statistics vary from, we've got like 67% all the way up to 95% of diets don't work. But we know they don't work, and we know that they don't work because we have to keep on doing them.
Right.
If if it worked, we wouldn't have like a, what is it, like a $72 billion like industry that's
Yeah.
growing and is predicted to continue growing into like the
Yeah.
hundreds of billions in like the next couple of years.
Yeah.
If diets worked, that number wouldn't be getting bigger, that we're getting smaller.
Yeah.
If diets worked, then the diets that came out in the 60s and 70s would have had an impact, and we would have far less fat people than we have now.
Yep.
Diets don't work. And that's the reality of things. And it's hard as well. It's hard to hear that. It's hard to think to yourself, how many diets have you done? That a perfect diet doesn't exist.
Yeah.
When you're thinking to yourself, okay, this diet didn't work, let's try another one. Maybe I need to try keto. Maybe keto worked for me this
Yeah.
time. They just don't work. They kind of go on similar principles, which is they're trying to make you restrict. They're trying to
Yeah.
get you to eat less of something. So no matter if you call weight loss like calorie counting, I'm not dieting, I'm
Yeah.
calorie counting, it's still a form of restriction.
Yeah.
It's still not going to work. So regardless or not of if we bring health into things and all these other bits and pieces, but diets still don't. And we're seeing that message. We're also seeing
Yeah.
that message from diets themselves now. We have like diets like
Oh my
Zoe.
God, the mental gymnastics happening in the diet industry to be like, we're not a diet.
We're not a diet. Like,
and we only have to say that because we know you don't think diets work, but this will, because you still want to lose weight. So, oh my God.
Oh, it's awful. We've got the Zoe diet in England, and the person who does Zoe has been talking about the same studies that traditionally anti-diets people will talk about, but he kind of construes them as well, and kind of pulls bits out of it that you're just like, but that's inaccurate, because he's like, oh, because this says this, we could totally help you lose weight. And I'm like,
Yeah.
know what it means. Like you're look, no, this isn't what it means.
Yeah.
So they're trying to do all of this now, that because people are waking up and going, okay, diets don't work, but then people are going, but what do I do then if I'm being told by all these people that I need to lose weight and diets don't work? What do I do? And this is my fear at the moment, because people are being told, okay, well, diets don't work, just take the weight loss drug.
Yep.
Sorted. Like, it's fine.
Yep.
It's just going to be easy. It's going to heal your relationship with food, your body. You're not going to have to worry about your hunger. You know, it's going to be fine. You're going to lose loads of weight. It's going to really be brilliant. It's going to be so easy. When the reality is, it's something it's masking that. As soon as you come off that drug, and there's, you know, it's licensed for like 2 years, I believe.
Yeah.
As soon as you take it, what are you going to do afterwards? That, you know, I know people who are being prescribed that drug who have binge eating disorder, and that binge eating disorder is still going to be there after they've come off of that drug.
Yeah.
It's because you need to do that. You need to do the work behind it. A drug isn't going to help an eating disorder. I just don't understand that. But yeah, that's where my worry comes. It's okay, but what if I don't diet, then what? And then people are jumping in because they're seeing money, because
absolutely,
fat people make people money.
Yes.
That's
and what I learned as a personal trainer was diets don't work, lifestyle changes work, which is no different than what's showing up now. However, it's also true that if the reason you gained weight in the first place had to do with unhealthy lifestyle habits, and then you make changes to them, you might lose this weight, right? So I would see it sometimes work. And this is where, you know, we can dispute the number. It's kind of hard to quantify, but 95% or whatever. Like I always say now that 5% is probably 2.5% people with eating disorders, diagnosed or undiagnosed, or disordered eating. I know, because I was one of them. I had sustained weight loss, if you will, when my entire life focused around it. Like, oh yeah, it definitely worked. And then I also feel like the other half, this other tiny, tiny portion, is what we imagine is going to happen, which is, you know, you just went through a hard time, stopped exercising, gained weight. So now that you start exercising, it comes right off. And I'm always like, if that was going to be you like, it would have, great. But if you're in a more or less routine lifestyle wise that feels like accessible, reasonable, it suits you, you know, you're doing something that feels like this is where I want to be, and the weight didn't come off, it's not going to come off. Like that is the only reason we see these stories of I lost it and I kept it off. It was because those were the people who only were in a bigger body because of some like lifestyle exclusive reason, you know, and that is not most people. Like, but that is the story we're told.
I agree with you. Yeah, and I think that's been misconstrued. Yeah, but that's been taken out of context at the moment.
Exactly.
From I had a conversation with someone on a post that actually the screenshot ended up on like a really awful gossip place. It got sent to me, and I was like, oh no. But basically, people have started. I've seen this like in a few places. People have been going, well, you're anti-diet, so therefore you just want to keep people fat, don't you? You just want to keep people fat and make people fatter. And I'm like, okay.
Or what's the other thing? Glamorizing.
Right? Yeah,
or whatever.
I will happily say that I'm glamorizing.
I was going to say, actually, that's kind of a delight, but yeah, definitely.
But yeah, they're taking it and they're going, well, you're trying to keep people fat. You're trying to make people fatter. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting the focus on how someone weighs. I'm trying to
Yeah.
help people focus on how they live in a way that best serves them, where they can prioritize health where they can, knowing that health isn't a moral
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
trying to remove that. But we know that we have healthy behaviors that is going to support us. But it's trying to put those in a way that serves us in our life, that isn't going to mean that we feel shame. You know, I teach people something called like health stacking. So it's a way of like prioritizing different aspects of your health at different times, which isn't just eating well and exercising. That's the only things you can do. No, there's so many other things you can do to support your health that you do have control over, you know. And when I actually discuss those, I think it literally goes over people's head and they're like, no, you're anti-weight loss. I'm like, no, people know when they're working with me, it's, you may get bigger, you may stay the same, you may get smaller, but none of that matters.
Right.
And we work on that because yes, some people may put healthy behaviors in, and those healthy behaviors might mean that they recover into a larger body, or they may stay that same, or they may recover into a smaller body. It's wherever their body is supposed to be. And we don't know that until we've gone through all this and worked through all of this.
Right.
But by the time that they've noticed that there's been a fluctuation in their weight, that doesn't matter because they've worked out their anti-fatness and their internalized anti-fatness. They've worked out that actually weight loss or weight gain isn't like a failure, it isn't a win, it just is. It's just how their body wants to exist. Whilst it's doing the things.
I love that it's being separated from health, but then also I think in the way that you talk about it, and this isn't always true in these spaces, it's very clear that neither category gets to have a moral judgment on it. Because I feel like a lot of times, even in intuitive eating and anti-diet spaces, they will put out a message that's like, guess what? Your health and your weight are different. And it's really important that you stay healthy. But, you know, it's like there is still that's a sticky point for a lot of people in this space, I think, is like, okay, I'm weight neutral, but I have to be healthy, whatever that means. Yeah, I have to. Yeah.
And that's why I think the health stuff is really important to look at and to almost redefine what health looks like for you.
Yep.
I think that's important to look at that, because when we look at the majority of people's health, it's okay, I must never be ill, I mustn't have any diseases or any chronic illnesses, I must be small, I must be thin because I must be a healthy weight, I must eat well and I must exercise. And that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. And then when you do end up being fat and that's out of your control, then that intense failure that you feel because you're not healthy, because society tells you you're not healthy, whereas actually, you know, anyone in any weight can be healthy or unhealthy, but that's neither good nor bad, because so many people don't choose to be ill or unhealthy. It's just,
or don't have access to what we're sold healthy looks like. Oh my goodness.
Or
okay, so
can't meditate out of depression, you know.
Right.
Just go for a walk.
So I love this conversation. I love the permission, the compassion, the attention to the role of privilege and marginalization, and the focus, instead of it being, which frankly, a lot of my work and episodes of this podcast have been like, these are the goddamn problems. This feels to me like so warm. The futurist idea, I think, sits in every word you've said. And it just feels so beautiful to focus on, like, yes, these are the problems, but also here's how we can talk about it differently to do less harm. Also, here's ways we can focus on things to make it better. Like, thank you so much for sharing everything. This was an incredible conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Of course. Tell a listener who wants to get in touch, find you on the internet, whatever it might be, work with you, where they can find you.
You can find me mainly on my Instagram. That's where you'll find all of my posts. I also have a Substack called Unflattering, and it's mainly focused around fat people and help fat people like accept themselves. And I've got a new article coming out about just like the good things about being fat. We don't talk about that enough.
I love it.
Let's talk about the good things about existing in a fat body rather than all the horrible things that people talk about.
Yes, this is your vibe.
Yeah,
Makes me so happy.
I challenge as well. I challenge things like the 95%. I've challenged like you know, when those big headliners come out and say fat people are costing the economy this much money, I broke it down. So have a look at that if that is something that speaks to you. I have group coaching that goes on pretty much all the time now, so come and find me on Instagram and have a look and see what you like.
Everyone listening, please go find Jeanette on Instagram. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. And thank you to everyone listening. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Nealand. I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. I put out new episodes of my podcast every Tuesday, so be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss those. And feel free to leave me a comment. If you are looking for more information about body neutrality or you want to work with me, you can always find me at my website, jessienealand.com. Or you can purchase my book, Body Neutral, a revolutionary guide to overcoming body image issues, wherever you buy books, ebooks, or audiobooks. We can also connect on Instagram or TikTok. My handle is Jessie Nealand. And I make this podcast for free and without any sponsors or ads. So if you want to support my show, you can use the Patreon link in the show notes and know that your support is always very much appreciated. Lastly, thank you to my brother, Jason Nealand, for creating the music that plays at the beginning of the show. And thank you for listening, learning, and moving toward personal and collective body liberation.